Hi dear students, welcome to Amha's Educational Institutions online class. This presentation includes the explanation of Unit 6, Mysteries and Superstitions, Lesson 2, in your book, New Streams in English, Volume 1. The presentation is presented to you by Mr. Hassan Amhaz. Objectives. At the end of this lesson, students should be able to use context clues to determine the meaning of new lexes, read to identify the topic explored, respond to different types of questions, inferential and referential, write sentences or a paragraph using vocabulary words. To follow up properly, please get your reading book, New Streams in English, Volume 1, and a pencil to jot down some important notes. Unit 3, Lesson 2, Mysteries and Superstitions. Paragraph 1. Scientists are now beginning to unravel what must be one of the great mysteries of this century. Nobody knew exactly what happened one day when an explosion rocked the Siberian countryside and sent silvery clouds around the earth. It took place on the early morning of 30 June 1908. Hundreds of square miles of Siberian forest were flattened and burned by a mysterious fireball that fell from the sky. So paragraph 1 starts with setting the atmosphere of the story of a mysterious incident that happened on the early morning of 30 June 1908 in Siberia. Scientists are now beginning to unravel what must be one of the great mysteries of the century. So the scientists are still trying to resolve the mystery of this incident. Mystery means something that is not understood, something that is beyond understanding, something that is vague. Nobody knew exactly what happened one day when an explosion rocked the Siberian countryside. Here is an example of an explosion. Let's check together.
Push the tank's metal walls to the breaking point.
Okay, get the tape on. You leave it up, for Christ's sake.
The news crew feels the heat wave from the blast.
So, it's not the explosion we are talking about, but this is how the explosion looks like. An explosion, something like this, rocked the Siberian countryside and sent silvery clouds around the earth. It sent clouds, something like this. They looked like they were made of silver because their color was gray. It took place on the early morning of 30 June 1908. The explosion happened on the early morning of 30 June 1908. Hundreds of square miles of Siberian forest were flattened and burned. As you see in the picture, the trees are knocked down, flattened, knocked down and burned by this mysterious fireball that fell from the sky. This is how the fireball looks like. So, you can see also in this picture that hundreds of years later, still no trees in the area that was hit by the fireball or the explosion. We continue with paragraph 2. The explosion was the equivalent of 1,000 Hiroshima atomic bombs. The heat incinerated herds of reindeer and charred tens of thousands of evergreens. For days and for thousands of miles down the earth, the sky remained bright at night with an eerie orange glow. As far as Western Europe, people were able to read at night without a lamp. The explosion had taken place in a remote area known more specifically as Tunguska. The writer explains that the mysterious explosion we are talking about that happened in Siberia was the equivalent of 1,000 Hiroshima atomic bombs. Can you imagine? The Hiroshima bomb that is known as the largest bomb or explosion through history is 100 times less than the mysterious explosion we are talking about. The heat incinerated herds of reindeer. So the heat burned herds of reindeer. Groups of reindeer, as you see in this picture, they are running away from the heat and from the fire that is caused by the explosion, and charred tens of thousands of evergreens. The explosion and the heat released by the explosion converted into charcoal the evergreen trees, the trees that remain green even through winter. So the explosion changed them into charcoal. As we said before, they were knocked down, burned, they changed into coal. For days and for thousands of miles down the earth, the sky remained bright at night with an eerie orange glow. So there was a strange, mysterious light in the sky, orange in color. As far as Western Europe, people were able to read at night without a lamp. For days, people were able to read because the sky was so bright with an orange color that appeared after the explosion. The explosion had taken place in a remote area. Remote means far or distant area, known more specifically as Tunguska. Paragraph 2. It was so remote and inaccessible that it took another 19 years before the first Russian scientist, Leonid Kulid, came to Tunguska. He was rewarded by a stunning sight of utter devastation. Scorched trees laid down in rows that stretched to the horizon. Kulid led a total of 5 expeditions to the area over a span of 14 years. They looked for a crater but found none. Then they looked for fragments or traces of a meteorite but could find none. So the area where the explosion, the mysterious explosion we are talking about, happened was so far and inaccessible. Inaccessible means can't be reached. It was very difficult to reach that area, that it took another 19 years before the first Russian scientist, Leonid Kulid, came to Tunguska. He was rewarded by a stunning sight of utter devastation. A stunning means unbelievable sight, unbelievable view of high degree. Utter means high degree of devastation or destruction. So, as soon as he arrived, he was shocked by an unbelievable high degree of destruction. Scorched trees laid down in rows that stretched to the horizon. As we said before, the trees were knocked down and burned in rows that stretched to the horizon. The horizon is the place where the sky seems to meet the earth. Kulid led a total of 5 expeditions to the area over a span of 14 years. An expedition is a journey for a specific purpose, especially to discover a new area. So, the Russian scientist Kulid led 5 expeditions to discover the area where the mysterious explosion happened. They looked for a crater but found none. A crater means a hole in the ground made by an explosion, as you see in this picture. But they didn't find anything like this. They didn't find any crater. Then they looked for fragments or traces of a meteorite, but could find none also. So they looked for fragments, just very small pieces or traces of a meteorite, but they didn't find any. A meteorite is a comet or asteroid that doesn't completely burn up when it enters the Earth's atmosphere. So comets or asteroids usually burn up in the sky before they enter the Earth's atmosphere. As a result, the comet or asteroid lands on the Earth's surface. We continue with paragraph 2. In the nearest villages, eyewitnesses told of a fireball streaking through the sky, horrifying noise and a blast that knocked people off their feet. Clearly something unprecedented had occurred at Tunguska, but the trees were the only tangible proof that remained. Despite the inconclusive evidence gathered, Khalid was certain that a meteorite had caused the inferno. He died in 1942 as a prisoner of war in the World War II. So the writer explains now that in the nearest villages, eyewitnesses told of a fireball. So some people who witnessed the event, the incident, said that they saw a fireball streaking through the sky, projecting, passing through the sky, and they heard horrifying noise, a shocking, alarming and strange noise, and they felt a blast, a violent wind that knocked people off their feet. They were so afraid and scared and shocked when they heard the horrifying noise and felt the violent wind. Clearly, something unprecedented had occurred at Tunguska. There was something that didn't happen before. Unprecedented. But the trees were the only tangible proof that remained. The only proof they had was the trees that were knocked down and burned. This was the only tangible proof. Tangible means touchable. Something you can see, you can touch. Despite the inconclusive evidence gathered, despite the inconclusive evidence, inconclusive means leading to no conclusion. There was an evidence, but it didn't lead to any conclusion. Khalid was certain that a meteorite had caused the inferno. Khalid was pretty sure that a meteorite had changed the place into a hell. Inferno is a place that looks like hell. He died in 1942 as a prisoner of war in the World War II. So the Russian scientist died in 1942.